Picture this. You're sitting at a desk trying to get some work done. Your phone buzzes. A notification pops up on your laptop. Your smartwatch vibrates. Welcome to the modern world of constant distraction. But it wasn't always like this. Today, we're taking a trip back in time to explore how people managed to focus before smartphones turned our brains into perpetual notification machines. Let's set the scene. It's the early 1990s. Grunge is all the rage, fanny packs are unironically cool, and the most advanced piece of technology in your pocket is probably a Yamaguchi. How did people in this prehistoric era of connectivity manage to get anything done? Buckle up, because we're about to find out. First things first, let's talk about the workplace. Imagine an office where the only sounds are the clacking of keyboards, the occasional ring of a landline, and Karen from accounting passive-aggressively sighing because someone ate her lunch from the communal fridge again. No Slack notifications, no email pings, no smartphones buzzing every 5 seconds. It's like a library, but with more polyester and the faint smell of stale coffee. In this archaic landscape, people had to rely on primitive tools to stay focused. One such tool was the humble to-do list. Not an app, mind you, but an actual piece of paper where you'd write down your tasks for the day. I know, it sounds like witchcraft, but bear with me. These analog task managers had some serious advantages. For one, you couldn't accidentally spend an hour scrolling through them while pretending to be productive. And crossing items off with a pen? Let me tell you, it's the original dopamine hit. But what about when you needed to block out distractions? Enter the Walkman, the OG of personal audio devices. Before noise-canceling headphones were a thing, people would pop in a cassette tape, ask your parents, and let the dulcet tones of Nirvana or Boyz II Men drown out the world around them. It was like having a force field of focus, powered by AA batteries and the magic of magnetic tape. Now, you might be thinking, but what if someone needed to reach you urgently? Well, kids, gather round, and let me tell you about a mystical device called the pager. This little clip-on wonder would beep or vibrate when someone needed to get in touch. The catch? All you'd get was a number to call back. No context, no preview, just the thrill of mystery with every beep. It was like playing communication roulette. For those times when you absolutely positively had to make a call on the go, there were payphones. These communication oases dotted the urban landscape, offering a brief connection to the outside world for the low price of a quarter. Using one required a level of planning and forethought that would baffle most modern smartphone users. You had to know the number you wanted to call, have the right change, and pray that the person you were calling was actually home. It was like a game of high-stakes telephone tag. But here's the kicker. All of these limitations actually helped people focus. When you couldn't be reached at any moment, you had longer stretches of uninterrupted time to dive deep into tasks. It's a concept so foreign to us now that it almost sounds like a superpower. You mean you could work for hours without checking your phone? What are you, some kind of concentration wizard? Let's talk about research and learning. Before you could Google any fact in seconds, people had to go to libraries. These hallowed halls of knowledge were like the internet, but with more dust and judgmental librarians. The act of physically going to a place dedicated to information and spending hours poring over books created a focused environment that's hard to replicate in our hyper-connected world. And speaking of books, they were the original deep work tool. Without the temptation to quickly switch to a different tab or app, readers could lose themselves in a story or subject for hours. It's a kind of sustained attention that many of us struggle to achieve now, as we've trained our brains to expect constant stimulation and novelty. But it wasn't all work and no play. Entertainment in the pre-smartphone era required a different kind of focus too. Watching TV meant committing to a show when it aired. No pausing, no rewinding, no checking IMDb to figure out where you know that actor from. If you got up to grab a snack during a crucial scene, tough luck. You had to rely on your friends to fill you in the next day, probably by the water cooler, in a conversation that didn't involve anyone staring at their phone. Video games were a different beast too. No autosaves or checkpoints every 2 minutes. If you wanted to beat that final boss, you had to commit. It was you, your Nintendo, and a battle of wills that could last hours. The focus required was intense, But so was the satisfaction of finally conquering that game you'd been working on for weeks. Even social interactions were more focused. When you met up with friends, you were fully present. No checking Instagram under the table or half listening while scrolling through Twitter. Conversations had a depth and intimacy that's harder to achieve when everyone's partially tuned into their digital lives. But let's not get too nostalgic. The pre-smartphone era wasn't some utopia of focus and productivity. People still found ways to procrastinate and get distracted. The difference was in the nature of those distractions. Instead of falling down a YouTube rabbit hole, you might spend an hour trying to achieve the perfect pencil balance on your desk. Instead of mindlessly scrolling through social media, you might doodle elaborate designs in your notebook margins. The point is, focus has always required effort. What's changed is the number of things competing for our attention at any given moment. In the past, distractions were more limited and often required some effort to seek out. Now, they're constantly at our fingertips, vying for every spare second of our time. So, what can we learn from this trip down memory lane? Is there a way to recapture some of that pre-smartphone focus in our modern, hyper-connected lives? Well, the good news is that many of the tools and techniques people used to stay focused in the past can still work today. The bad news is that using them requires a level of self-discipline that might feel like trying to resist gravity. Here are a few vintage focus techniques you can try. Try writing out your tasks for the day on actual paper. The physical act of writing and crossing off items can help you stay more engaged with your goals. Designate certain areas or times as smartphone-free. It's like creating your own little time machine to a less connected era. Instead of immediately reaching for your phone when you have a free moment, try letting your mind wander. It's how people used to come up with their best ideas after all. Set aside time to read without any digital distractions. It's like CrossFit for your attention span. Instead of juggling multiple tasks and devices, try focusing on one thing at a time. It's retro, but effective. And this time management method was invented in the late 1980s, but it's still relevant. Work in focused 25-minute bursts, then take a short break. No phones allowed during the work periods. Choose a TV show to watch at its scheduled time. No pausing or rewinding. It's like training wheels for building your focus muscles. Remember, the goal isn't to completely reject modern technology. Smartphones and the internet have brought incredible benefits and conveniences to our lives. The challenge is finding a balance that allows us to harness the power of these tools without becoming slaves to them. In the end, maybe the most important lesson we can learn from the pre-smartphone era is the value of being present. Whether you're working on a project, spending time with loved ones, or just enjoying a moment of solitude, giving your full attention to the task at hand can lead to richer experiences and deeper connections. So the next time you feel the urge to check your phone for the 100th time in an hour, take a deep breath and channel your inner 90s kid. Embrace the radical idea of doing just one thing at a time. Who knows? You might find that the key to modern productivity has been hiding in the past all along. And hey, if all else fails, you can always bring back the fanny pack. At least it'll give you something to focus on that isn't a screen.